The NBA had its first round of the draft last night, and while we kind of knew what was going to happen in the first few picks, a lot of drama took place afterward. Let's discuss. I think a lot of the drama begins at number 5, where Ace Bailey, from all accounts, handled the pre-draft process with the Shedeur Sanders playbook and did not get the Shedeur Sanders results, as he did not have to go through a extensive draft dive or anything like that. He gets picked actually earlier than some people thought, at 5 to the Utah Jazz. Now, obviously, there was a lot of drama around this, as he was just no-showing different draft workouts, and seemed like he handled a lot of this process quite incorrectly. And while you can talk about a number of different ways and different scenarios around that particular thing, I don't put a ton of it on the kid because I think a lot of it is the representation. And it sounds like the representation is new, and it felt like a bit of a disaster. And when things are handled that poorly, I'm not going to blame the 18-year-old. I'm going to put this on the adults that are in the room. And so shame on all of them for how they handled it. But a lot of the talk was that this was to fall to the Brooklyn Nets at 8. That was the hope, was that apparently from the Bailey side, is that he didn't want to go to one of the first 7 teams. He wanted to go to the Brooklyn Nets. And that is all fine and well. You got to remember Danny Ainge is there, though, and he is looking at this as, look, I'm picking at 5, and I just got a top 3 talent. That's a win for me. And Danny Ainge is very much of the, I'll make it work, and if I don't, I'll trade you for something else. That'll make it work. But I'm not going to take the 3rd best player available at number 5 just because, oh, he doesn't want to come to Utah. Danny Ainge is going to have to work around. He doesn't have to come to Utah a lot if he is going to build a championship roster with this Jazz team. And so when you look at the best case scenario for this, for Danny Ainge and the Jazz organization, if this hits, like if this kid was just kind of being shitty because the adults around him were telling him to be shitty, then I think there is certainly an opportunity that you can sit the kid down and be like, look, no hard feelings. That was kind of brutal, but clean slate. Come in here, ball out. And if he comes in and balls out, this is the exact type of high-level talent that the Jazz have been looking for. When the draft lottery happened and we looked at if this was a conspiracy or not, one of the things we talked about was, did the NBA just get rid of tanking? And you look at the Jazz as a pretty prime example of that, because it looks pretty bleak for this organization right now. There isn't a whole lot of high-end talent on this basketball team, and if being bad and getting high up in the draft aren't going to happen side by side, then it is going to be a very long road for this team that can't exactly build things up through free agency, right? So they have a long road to get to. This is the type of a high-end talent that, if it hits, makes that road, it either makes the road shorter or it allows you to travel faster on it. That just, depending on what you want to, what metaphor you want to use with that. But this is a fantastic, I think, a fantastic gamble here for the Jazz. And if you meet with the kid and he doesn't want to be there, then you ship him out. Who cares? He's gone. All right, see ya. We'll make the trade. We'll get some value back for this, and we'll build it up that way. And I could kind of see that there were talks, like he was offering to trade the pick to Brooklyn. You're like, look, we'll make a deal here. Let's do this. And they're like, no, you're not going to, he doesn't want to go there. You're not going to take him. And Danny, almost out of spite, just being like, oh yeah, watch me, and selecting the kid. It gives them a high-level chip to play with, and I think it really does kind of show, like, no, we're taking this seriously here and trying to get out of this. It also affects the Washington Wizards, because it did kind of feel like they were going to be the team that would benefit from that type of a pick, and they were going to be the ones who are like, who cares, we'll get him to like the DMV, it'll be fine. And off in Washington he goes. That doesn't go their way, but I still think they pivoted really, really effectively in getting Tre Johnson. That is the offense that they needed really, really badly, and he can be the type of player that can kind of springboard it. Again, this is an if he reaches his potential type of a thing, but that could be potentially transformative for the Wizards. And you look at drama in the NBA, which I think was the big word of the night. the Wizards are kind of getting away from a lot of the drama. Now, moving out Jordan Poole off to the New Orleans Pelicans and bringing in CJ McCollum, with just adding a level of professionalism to that organization. With Kelly Olynyk, who has always been an interesting big, either coming off of the bench or in a starting role. And now with Sarr, you pair Tre Johnson. All of a sudden, you have a pretty good offensive upside sort of a team. Defense is going to need some work, but offensively, there's quite a bit of upside there. So I think this was a really smart pivot for Washington to kind of avoid the murky waters, so to speak. And I think this was, not to look too big picture on one night, but I do think there is a bit of a changing of the guard happening here in the NBA, where you are looking at a couple of teams that I think have kind of benefited from just being those teams, quite frankly. When you look at the Miami Heat and the Brooklyn Nets, Brooklyn, I think, really did believe that Ace Bailey was just going to fall into their lap at number 8. And so that's why they didn't do a whole lot of movement at any particular time. And so when that didn't happen, they took a real long shot. And you could, like, there were so many different opportunities, it felt like, for Brooklyn to trade down and make a couple of big moves with their picks. And instead, they just reach on a kid who I saw one draft board had him at 26. Like that's it feels like Brooklyn's whole strategy is basically what happened with KD and Kyrie will happen again, and people will just want to come here because it is Brooklyn, ignoring the fact that we have like no history or anything at all in this particular market. So you have that, and then you have Miami, who it does kind of feel like they just feel everything is going to fall into their lap, and they were viewed as one of the losers of this draft. Now, we'll see that there have been times where, oh, this is going to be a complete loser, and it has turned out amazingly. And there have been times where it's like, look, you guys absolutely stole this draft. This was a number one home run draft for you guys, and it doesn't turn out. So those sorts of things can be a little bit overdone. But I do think that some of the analysis around, oh, well, you can't really grade a whatever until such and such a time. And I do think that there is a little bit to that. There's a lot to that. But I also think that there is something to be said for knowing the board and knowing where players should be drafted. And it is also easy to just say, oh, they should have traded down. A number of other teams would need to say yes for that to be the case. And I think it's maybe a little bit more difficult than fans think. But I think that some of the criticism of, oh, draft grades, what do we know? I still think that you can look at what was available, where was a player projected to go, and where did he actually get picked, and figure out if there was a winner and a loser in that, even if the player outplays expectations. So I think this is a weird tangent on draft grades, but we're allowed to have them, and we're allowed to change them as the years kind of go on. So a lot of drama happening at the top of the NBA draft. There was more drama with the Raptors as well. We will get to Toronto's pick in a second, but looking at a few of the other teams here, the New Orleans Pelicans, as they go into this new era, I absolutely have zero idea what they are going for. Like, trading for Jordan Poole in the year of our Lord 2025 makes literally zero sense to me, and I don't know if I'll be able to be convinced otherwise of anything. Like, I like Sadiq Bey a little bit, but when you have everything that is going on surrounding Zion Williamson right now, I just don't think another headache like a Jordan Poole is the way to go to elevate your basketball team. Like, they feel like it has crumbled around everything out there in New Orleans. And obviously there was a lot of expectations and a lot of hype around Zion Williamson. And when you see it at its highest level, boy, it looks great. But the fact that it was never able to click with Ingram, it felt like it had so much potential. And now it feels like it would be pretty miserable to be a New Orleans Pelicans fan. And the way I think that they handled this draft process and the way that I think they've handled this offseason so far has been very, very poor and puts them in a difficult spot, I think, going forward. But the night was not all bad, as it starts off predictably with Cooper Flagg going to the Dallas Mavericks. And we've been hyping up this kid for a long time. Now we really know the landing spot for him. And it gives you an interesting roster for the Mavericks, depending on which way they want to go. The point guard situation is tough right now with no Kyrie Irving. But aside from that, with just point guard X, you have Clay, Flagg, AD, and Lively, with PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford coming off of the bench as well. Like that, there's a lot of fun that you can have with this roster, and I think if you bring in a point guard, this team is actually pretty competitive. They re-signed Gafford. I would imagine Lively. I can't remember if they have signed him or not, but they have things set up very well with their bigs for a little bit. It also gives them a couple of trade chips to kind of play around with. So for a team that was in a pretty dire spot after the trading of a superstar, they now have a few options and have quite a bit of intrigue going into next season. Harper to the Spurs, it makes a lot of sense. I just feel like he checks a lot of boxes that you would want him to check. And I know that some prominent voices in basketball media are saying that Harper and Fox just won't work together, so why are you even going to try? I still want to try it if I'm San Antonio. And if it doesn't work, you can flip Fox out of it and make a trade. But I don't think any trade that you could make for Fox now is not going to be there in January. So I don't mind San Antonio giving it a try, and not just throwing the keys to the car at a very important time to Harper and just nope, you have no leeway whatsoever. We are trying to maximize our star player now, and it is up to you to get that out of him. So while I think he could be that type of a player, to expect him to do that year one is a little bit much. So I don't mind keeping Fox around there if you're the Spurs. I do think that maybe you need to add a little bit more on this roster because the West is so competitive right now. And like Phoenix is just accumulating bigs like you wouldn't believe. But I think getting Williams in that trade from the Hornets and going out and getting Malawak from in the draft, I think sets them up in a very interesting way now going forward. And so even the teams that you kind of felt were going to be falling off, they're not fallen as much now. So this West is going to be competitive. So I don't think it is, okay, mission accomplished for the offseason for San Antonio, but I do think that it shouldn't result in a gigantic blowing up of the roster unless a Giannis becomes available or something along those lines. The real drama, it felt like, was going to start at 3, and I guess the big surprise was that there was no surprise at all with the 76ers sticking and going with Edgecombe. I was convinced the second that the 76ers got the 3rd overall pick that they would be moving on from that pick and going out and trying to accumulate more star potential, which I think is a real feather in the cap of Edgecombe, because Daryl Morey, it is all about the stars. And if he thinks that Edgecombe is worth it to stick and pick at 3, then he must see star potential in him. So it gives you an interesting now backcourt with Edgecombe and with Maxey. We will see about the rest of the roster. The injury issues all over the place on that team. But this is a very interesting fit now with Maxey and with Edgecombe, giving you quite a bit of athleticism, I think, for this particular basketball team. We're not going to go through every pick. The last one I just want to talk about here is Knuppel going to the Hornets. I think that this could go down as one of the more important picks of this draft. I think, like, a lot of people are focusing on that top 3 and then 5 with Bailey, but I think Knuppel at 4 has the potential to be, again, I don't want to be over dramatic here, but I think it has the potential to be a little transformative for the Hornets. He has so much ability as a consistent scoring threat that you kind of forget how good he is at some of the other things. And I think, while he is not mellow in terms of his playmaking ability, I think if and when Ball gets hurt or wants to move on or anything like that, not that it is going to be just like that's fine because we have him already, but Knuppel adds a playmaking ability that will at least allow this team to keep their heads above water if Ball gets injured. So I think while this does, when everyone is healthy, this gives them a very good scoring option. It also does help things out depth-wise when it comes to playmakers, which has been a real issue for the Charlotte Hornets. But overall, like, I think you look at the top of this draft, and obviously, like, the Dallas Mavericks get into a substantially better spot. The 76ers, I think, have a long ways to go still, but at least have been able to set a foundation now with your guards. Harper feels like he can be a 1B to Wembanyama's 1A if these guys can reach their potential. Knupel feels like he can bail the Hornets out of quite a few situations. Bailey, if it clicks, it just feels like the exact type of a player to get the ball rolling for the Utah Jazz, and the Washington Wizards getting Tre Johnson, bringing in a lot of that offensive help that they needed desperately. It just seems like the top 6 really were able to just like home run, home run, home run, home run, home run. And it'll be varying degrees of those home runs, but for the positions that those teams were in to get the players that you wanted, that is, I just feel like this was a draft that lined up very well for the boxes that these teams needed to check. Now, that's a lot of projecting, and it's a lot of night one after the draft talk. One, two, three, four, maybe even all 6 aren't going to work out the way that these teams want. But for today, as we are talking about this, not 12 hours after the draft wrapped up, this is, I think, a very good spot for a lot of these teams. So it was dramatic up at the top, but what ends up falling in place, I think, is very, very helpful for these teams. So I think it's a really good sign for a lot of these groups that they were able to kind of check the box that they needed coming out of draft day. Just a reminder that things are ever changing around Couch Potato Diary. So you can follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein on Instagram, X, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky.